Welcome to Wellifehub Incorporated. This is Conversations, and I am having today an industrial psychologist by the name of Siamtanda Ntlahla. Thank you so much for this and agreeing to be doing this conversation, which I think is very important, especially when it comes to careers. But specifically, we are going to be talking about navigating career dynamics and fostering resilience. And maybe a little bit on your background so that the listeners in the audience get to know who is Mr. Ntlahla all about.
Thank you so much, Kateko. I think I really appreciate as well, your invitation. For me, the journey we have come from, meeting you and you contributing to me qualifying as an industrial psychologist. Let me first say thank you for that.
Oh, I did not think you will mention that, but thank you. Taken.
Because we are speaking about careers.
Definitely.
So this is also how
your career journey.
Yes,
and maybe to the audience. I think you and I we met about 4 or 5 years ago.
Correct.
Was it pre or after COVID? I think
it was during COVID.
During COVID,
yeah,
even COVID. And you were looking for just an exposure, so that it's not confusing for our audience, because they might be wondering what is an industrial psychologist had to do with a journey. I mean, a counseling psychologist have to do with the journey of an industrial psychologist, because yes, maybe for a lay person it might not matter, but it's also good to be leading the people to know. So you needed exposure on the practicum, because in an industrial psychologist space, naturally, for your internship, you don't have exposure to counseling a person. It's more about, your work dynamics versus the counseling itself. And do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so as an industrial psychologist, our scope is heavily focused on organizational effectiveness. So we deal with a lot of work context, I would say points. So our scope is focused on, let's say, organizational development, focusing on coaching, focusing on talent development, as well as focusing on assessments. So part of the training I had to do then was also the counseling, because sometimes events do happen at the work. Someone has an episode, and then, there's a traumatic trigger that happens. As a psychologist or industrial psychologist, we have to find a way to contain that. And this is through counseling, and this is why I needed to be in contact with you to gain some hours, in terms of understanding, how do you deal with that kind of a situation.
And there was also, and we're not necessarily speaking specifically about psychology, but there was where you said, as an industrial psychologist and as a psychologist, it's also to help our listeners to say, we've got a scope of practice and a scope of the profession. And what that means is that the scope of practice sort of dictates the specific specializations that we can do, versus the scope of the profession, where we are all psychologists. Okay, and I think, for our audience to get that, we are able to deal with human behavior, their thoughts, the treatment, the diagnosis, as a qualified, licensed health profession counsel psychologist in the South African borders.
Correct.
So meaning that whenever you come across a qualified, licensed psychologist, they're able to deal with your mental health issues. They're able to deal with behavioral, be it in the workspace, be it as a parent, be it in relationships, in romantic relationships, because that is basically our training, and that's the basis. And then there's categories, it's specialization.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Correct. Correct. Sure. Yeah. So when we had the conversation, just reflecting on the journey and how you contributed, it's so fitting for our topic for today.
Most of
So that's why I'm saying thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And with that, I wanted to ask, to say, career paths are so they are no longer linear in them. They are very much complex in nature. And what would you, for yourself, what would we mean by saying that, what does career complexity mean?
So this concept of career complexity is not really new to us. I think many of psychologists or people who are in the workplace had already predicted these things, because if you look at a career is within, of course, a context, a work environment context, and you find that our working context has been now different. People used to be at the office full time, but now we're at a point where it's a hybrid model. Now you have two offices. You have a primary office, you have a secondary office, which is primary office is within the workplace, but the second one is your work, is your home,
where you work 24 hours. There are no work. If you don't have boundaries, there are no working hours. If you don't have boundaries.
So true. So this is one of the complexities we are dealing with. Secondly, it means that when you speak about career complexity, we have to look at skills. It doesn't mean that what you have studied is good enough anymore. Because of this the complexity we're speaking about, we need a different skill, because job descriptions are continuously changing. The organization is continuously changing. The customer always seeks something different. So all these things, they are contributing to all our career choices. And there's no like a stagnant way or a linear way to say how you can be able to succeed into your life. So one of the things that becomes important for an individual is to look deep down into themselves, right? To find out what is their own identity. Because I always say within the workplace, there are three identities. There is your identity, there is the team identity that you're going to belong in or a function, and as well as there's the organization's identity. And it's so important that you understand what is your identity and how you align yourself to these different contexts I'm speaking about. And this is what is adding to the complexity, So we can speak about, the globalization that, takes place, the job market, that continuously change. We can speak about, as I mentioned, the customer, the organizational needs that continuously, are changing. This is why careers are also as complex as how our organizations are. For instance, I'll make an example. I am also in my own career as an industrial psychologist. If you know, I work for a global company. The team that I am in is not based in South Africa.
Which also says your meetings are in different time zones.
Correct.
Sure.
So yes.
And if you are not adaptive,
so one of the skills I needed to really have was that, I must be able to adapt. And this is one of the things we will also speak about. How do you foster resilience? How do you become resilient? How do you adapt to ensure that as much as your career continues to grow, your journey, but you ensure that as well as you continuously adapt to these needs that takes place,
I'm hearing you speak about that adaptability and your skill set not being enough. And oftentimes I have conversations with people to say, we talk about soft skills and hard skills. And to me, I would say it's a myth to think that your EQ, it's a soft skill, or your time management, your financial management, your stress management, it's a soft skill, because in essence, and you and I know from the project that we had been working with as consultants with Kaya Consulting, that people who get ahead in life and in their careers, it's not because of their IQ and the so-called hard skill set. It's the so-called soft skill set, which then makes me wonder, can we still call them soft skills? You need to manage time, because you might be in Tokyo minus 6 hours, plus 6 hours, or Singapore plus 6 hours, and then New York minus 6, and you have a meeting midday.
Correct.
And you will need to manage that, and that will make a success of you being in that career. So speak to this concept of that skill set versus the so-called soft skills that we might even maybe undermine, or things they are secondary thing, extra thing, versus a must-have to cultivate EQ.
So true, so true. I must say, even in HR, we have moved away from speaking about technical and soft skills, right? As much as it's still an old term that
in
was
the
being
language,
used,
yes,
but
yes, yes.
we speak about competence.
Yeah.
You know, now when we speak about competence, there are three things that we take into consideration. It's your knowledge, is your skill, also is your attributes, right?
Your knowledge, your skill, and your attributes.
Yes.
And that tells me also why when we do a career assessment, then we tap not only on aptitude.
Correct, correct.
Aptitude tells us your potential, but it's in your personality and those, your capability to be resilient, which is what we're also talking about, because being adaptive helps you to be resilient.
So, taking that into consideration, right? Because what you find now, especially when we're looking at, when we're doing a job interview, right? When you're being assessed, you're assessed in three different ways, I would say. So the first one will be where we look at your qualification, we look at your experience, and so on, right? But then the second thing that you get assessed to when you do the interview, now this is where they are looking at the behavioral competencies now. This is about us, seeing, how you engage with us, but those competencies are more verbal, kind of, where we can see
the interaction.
Interaction, but they also based on your past, how you have reacted in the past. Then that's where we also have an assessment. So psychometric assessments come there in, where we can now tap into the unconscious, the things that are underlying, the underlying, behaviors that you have.
And that's why you need a psychologist to do that, because no one can analyze the underlying.
Yes, correct, correct. And this shows you the complexity of a human, that we can't box people, because people continuously change. They are dynamic in nature. So that's why even in terms of assessing them, we use different tools and to be able to understand their competence, and at the same time, we leave some room, because there is also that room of potential that we don't really know, when making a decision. So to answer really the question around technical soft skills, we have done away with that. The focus now is about, competence. That's the term we are using. And this contributes then to what we are speaking about, that firstly, resilience. You spoke about, emotional intelligence, EQ. Emotional intelligence is a direct predictor, of success. Even to young children, children in school, those who show high EQ, they are self-aware, how their emotions impact, their other parts. They are also are able to self-regulate their own emotions, when it comes to themselves, to others, to things, to situations, right? Because we have to look into the whole aspect of social, emotional intelligence. And you find that this becomes the crust of what makes a person, because it's the emotions, it's the processing that has to be done by the head, and as well as those characteristics that you have that then makes you even perform even better. So one of the things that become important as well in the workplace, I always tell people this, that 25% of your technical skills in this instance, for you to be successful in the workplace, let me put it that way, is 25% is your technical skills, right? Is your knowledge about, what kind of work you do and the skill you have to do that work in the best way you can do it. But 75% has to do with your personal, we call it a personal type, or, your personality, how people view you within the work context. And this is where now it has to do with the behaviors, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in. And this is why it's so important that for parents, for individuals, let us teach our kids around identity. Let us teach ourselves, find out, how can you get to know yourself more better. This is what will make you more successful. This is how you can be able to navigate yourself through any kind of context that you encounter within the a working context. And within our context of South Africa, you find that I was so shocked. I think in January, I heard that almost 825 doctors didn't have jobs. And this is a scarce skill,
I've got something to say about that. I won't say it here because I'm going to cause some zavalazo. I've got something to say about that. And maybe let me not say it today. I might turn into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
In terms of job scarcities and unemployment, all of that. I know how real it is.
Correct.
I have personal experience within my family. I always say to people, if you are a resourceful person, you'll never be out of work.
Correct. Oh, that's powerful. Yeah, right there. And one of the things also when I looked into this was I went through this article and tried to understand it as well. And you would find that with these doctors, right, you're not limited to South Africa. We have to do away with this thing of thinking that we are working maybe, in a context of we have to work within South Africa. There are doctors needed in Cuba. There are doctors needed in different countries. This is a high, you have a skill that you have that, is in demand. And for me, if you look at a doctor, like that is like a very important person, to have. Yeah. And you can't tell me that we don't have.
Well, for now,
okay.
Because remember earlier on there was a protest, I think about a few months ago of doctors. So I think in my conversation with Sia, to the listeners, in no way am I minimizing the fact that there's lack of jobs or job created, but we need a different skill that can help us to do things out of the box. And what is that box?
And this is why for me, especially for this conversation, if anyone takes anything from this conversation, you have to look deep down in yourself. You have to understand your strengths, what you need development in, and this is where you need to be able to look at opportunities. So for instance, when as I develop myself, one of the things I look into is formal learning. It's also networking. And as well as it's looking at, having a mentor, and as well as trying as much as possible to be visible, within where I operate, to be a resource.
So somebody says, yeah, I'm so shy, I cannot network.
I must tell that person.
It's a skill that you need to learn.
Because all these skills can be learned. Of course, it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot from you, but to be able to succeed, you need to have it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is the take I would like to give as we round off maybe the conversation, is that for young people or people who are, let's say, in a middle life crisis, reinvent yourself. Those who are still starting their careers, your personal goal should always be self-development, continuous learning. Learn to just find what can work for you, and you focus on that. The more you focus on what you're good at, the more opportunities that do come.
Absolutely.
So as we deal with the career complexity, we understand it is there, but what do we take from it? We have to continuously learn, find opportunities, network, and as well as learn to adapt. Yeah.
And I want to actually end off with that, being adaptable and managing to remain resilient in career complexity. We'll end with that. But What I'm also hearing from you, Sia, is that as much as there will be these limitations, the structural limitations, this contextual limitation, you're saying as an individual, take responsibility, because you might say there are no jobs, I don't have education, I don't have money to go to school. I come from a particular, maybe an impoverished or a vulnerable space, which I could not get these opportunities that you're talking about. In 2020, during COVID, when places caved in, I grew the most. This was one of the reasons I resigned in my permanent post. I don't know if when we met, I was still full-time in my academic post. I grew the most because when everybody was caving in, I saw that opportunity that you're talking about, because everybody was anxious and depressed. And that is right up my alley as a psychologist. But also at the same time, what I was also hearing is some people will even struggle to catapult or even springboard from that place of I can't speak, I can't network. But that's also where we come in to work with a person.
Oh, yes.
To come alongside them and maybe explore where those limiting beliefs come from, explore what informs their core beliefs, because the belief will be so core that they make that belief part of their identity.
It paralyzes the person.
It paralyzes the person to moving into any action. And maybe with that, in terms of our function, in how we can help, because you also talked about, as an industrial psychologist, you do coaching. And I know people go to life coaches. I don't have anything against a life coach at all. A life coach has got a space, just as a fitness coach, just like a financial coach. I've got a mentor and mentors or business coaches. But as somebody who knows the subconscious and the underlying levels of a human, how do you even come in as a coach, and then also rounding it off with the adaptability, fostering resilience in career complexity?
So for us, I like how you have provided context and build up on this topic. I think another thing that remains important, as you said, for us is the understanding the psyche, the makeup of the person as a whole, by not really jumping into conclusions, because one of the things that becomes important is that we must understand our underlying beliefs, our understanding, our context, in terms of how we grew up, what has impacted our belief because of how we grew up. The context, it becomes so important. And for me, it's always to diagnose, assess and find, with the person, what do they believe, outside, let's say, the frameworks we work with, right? But what's important is to work with someone the journey of discovering, as I spoke about reinvention, starting to question, why do I think this way? Start to question, why do I believe I can't do this? The I can't needs to always be visited. And this is where, as a psychologist, we are equipped to work with a person like that and be able to not just unlock, but the person find strength to unlock for themselves. Because we are just kind of a
By the way, we're not counselors. We don't counsel you. That is why we say, we unpack. So that you are the one.
Yes. So a role that we play is an enabling role. A role that equips, empower the person to find the issues, and as well as to create a path for themselves. Because what's important, as I spoke about, identity. Identity is the is the makeup of you. It's you as a person. And we believe, your belief about the person is that everyone has the potential. Everyone has the potential to do anything they focus on, and this is why for us, we work with someone's psych and, take the walk with them, and to them being at a point where they can say to themselves, you know what, I think I can. Once someone says, I think I can, it's a very good start, because that means it's here in the mind. It's going to translate into behavior. And this is where now, we will then be able to work with a person and for them to get to a point where if you are that person who was shy, now you're starting to speak to meetings. You start to create steps with you. At least say something in a meeting. In a meeting, at least have a solution. Be more visible. Develop a personality. That where you are able to speak out. To express yourself. How do you go about it? In not being rude, but you still be able to transfer. The communication and so on. So these are all the kind of things we can be able to work with the person and to enable them. And ensure that they're able to rise above the complexity.
And I know that, because our time ran out, I want us maybe in the very near future, not to hang the audience and the listeners for too long, talk to all those different aspects that you were talking about, reinventing yourself, becoming resilient, how it looks like as well in terms of performance and limiting performance. Obviously, some of the pop psychology words that gets thrown around will be self-sabotage, how that process works, because it also shows a lot in work and in performance as well. And I think, yes, I know it was, like a sound bite. Even though we talked a lot, I will have wanted us to unpack it, because there might be somebody who is thinking, you know what, I need to be adaptable. Maybe my career is becoming a little bit absolute. I need to embrace technology, even though I'm not in the tech world. And how do I do that, Sia? But Sia is available for consultations here at the practice, also at his own extended hours, which is online as well, to unpack and walk this journey, especially where you're struggling with, vocalizing yourself in the workplace, or you find yourself maybe having a drinking problem and you're thinking it's just a drinking problem and you need to take it to a counseling or a clinical psychologist. But as an industrial psychologist, he's able to also show you what could be at play, because you drinking, again, you sabotaging performance. But where does that come from? Maybe you thinking that, you can see that you are so great, but you are afraid of embracing that success for yourself, because where you come from, you need to humble yourself. It's a whole underlying and subconscious process that we cannot obviously explain to you in this video. But as I'm saying, Mr. Ntlahla is available to consult with you to be able to unpack this a little bit more. Yeah.
No, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.